one of our first fives. Today we're looking at this text from Ephesians chapter 4. And one of the things you'll notice about it is it really does call us to think about the other person. Because I don't know about you, but like most people, I find myself wanting to just think about me. And maybe I'm not alone in that, but I think I'm definitely not alone in that if we're honest. But what might happen if we begin to think as God calls us to think? And I think Paul does a good job of helping us begin to understand that. So here's what Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 4. As a prisoner for the Lord, I should stop right there. Paul talks about how he chooses to be a prisoner to God. He wants to be a prisoner as a follower of Jesus Christ, that he is committed, he has enslaved himself to being a follower of Jesus. Goes on to say, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. What's the calling? To be a disciple of Jesus, to help bring heaven to earth, to be his unique people in the world. Be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But to each one of us grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, when he ascended on high, he led captives in his train and gave gifts to men. What does he ascended mean, except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions? He who descended is the very one who ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. It was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, and some to be pastors and teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we all reach unity in the faith, in the knowledge of the Son of God, and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. Then we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, by the cunning and craftiness of men and their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will in all things grow up into him who is the head, that is, Christ. From him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love, as each part does its work. That is what it means to be a follower of Jesus. I'm just going to mention a couple things here that it points out, and I would encourage you to go read this a few times throughout this day from Ephesians chapter 4. Right? What he says, be completely humble and gentle. Be patient. Bear with one another in love. Make every effort to live in unity. There is one body and one Spirit. Goes on to say about how we're called to live in the middle of this. The way that we are united, he says this, that some people are called to be prophets, some evangelists, some apostles, some to be pastors and teachers, to prepare God's works of service for the body of Christ may build up. But we're all called to be humble and patient, to be gentle, and to bear with one another in love. And sometimes to bear with one another in love is much harder than other times. But if we'll lean into these things, if we'll be described and defined as these attributes as what are characteristic of our life, if that is true, then this end becomes true as well. Then we're not bounced back and forth and tossed by the winds and waves of some weird teaching or of people's cunning ways of trying to get us to think differently about the world and to give up on God or whatever that may be like. The problem is, how many of us are willing to live a life in which we are humble and gentle, which we desire to keep unity? Doesn't mean uniformity, doesn't mean we don't have ways we see the world, but to be so committed to following Jesus that it would impact the lives of others. And then what we might find is we are speaking the truth in love, and we grow up towards Christ, who is the head of his church, and we are a part of one body. Did you know that? That you and I, if we are followers of Jesus, are part of the same body. And so do we build one another up? Do we care for each other? Are we so committed? Are we living as humble and gentle? Are we bearing with each other in love? And that's my challenge for you and I today. May you read this at least one more time today. Ephesians 4, the first 16 verses. And we'll catch you next time for another First 5.